We're going to begin our lecture 4. I think this is Strengths, Goals, and Atomic Habits. Woo-hoo, I love this information. Little bit of sort of warm up as we come into awareness as an adult, right? We sort of wake up, and I'm an adult now. I have an adult brain and not a teenage brain, and it is a different structure to have an adult brain and not a teenage brain. We come in now with all these pre-wired patterns and tendencies that we find ourselves doing. You didn't wire them in. You did not code your own behavior patterns. They were wired in for you. So ease up on the self-incrimination relative to that stuff, you guys. I realize that doesn't mean we don't want to change things, because we do. But at the same time, we don't need to beat ourselves up for what was pre-wired, right? And you've learned from neuroplasticity that you can make changes. So that part is fantastic news. But we don't need to be hard on ourselves what we just basically for being handed a deck of cards, which is essentially what happens. So both our experiences and our genetic predispositions interrelate. You know, the DNA is a double strand, and the nature and nurture double strand exactly the same. You can see that we're about 30% genetic predispositions, and predispositions means tendencies that are then influenced by nature, right, by our experience in the world, and 70% what we get from our environment. So it's, you know, depending on what characteristic it is, some things are more genetic. For example, height is more genetically determined, and other things are less genetically, you know, determined. Everything has an environmental influence, though, that's very strong. So we're all mysteries. You didn't really create you inherited you, and then you start working on the creation part once you're an adult, right? Now, this is Anthony DeMello, who's an Indian philosopher and psychotherapist, who said that which you are aware of you can control, that which you're not aware of controls you. And so the more we become aware of something, in fact, what I always tell my kids is that once you're aware of something, it's your responsibility to work on dealing with that. But until you're aware of it, it's sort of an essential innocence, because you're not aware, you don't realize, right? And so once we start to become aware that we're a set of systems that often operate on autopilot based on things learned in the past, both physically and psychologically, we can start to finesse the system. So we can begin to work with the system. And it takes time, but your growth curve is very high. So from until about age 25, 26 years old, you can rewire yourself much faster than as you become older. You still can hack the system, and there are things you can do to learn extremely well. Well, neuroplasticity is just faster when you're younger. That's the thing. Walt Whitman said, "I contain multitudes." This is idea that we're a collective of systems already underway with grand momentum. And these are behavioral patterns, right? These are emotional patterns. These are cognitive patterns, like one of you mentioned earlier about wanting to shift to speaking with more self-supportive statements, right? And that can be a deliberate shift. But that is one of the kinds of patterns that we sort of wake up and realize that we have this pattern of thinking this way. Some of the patterns come from nature, like jealousy. My dog is jealous. My dog's insanely jealous. And we talked last time about how some of these things come from sort of a more animal nature part of our brain, when we talked about the 3-part brain and the mammal system part of your brain, right? So you snap at each other, you and your friends snap at each other. That's like 2 dogs growling over a bone a little bit, right? But we have this additional ability to reflect on those things. And as we're going to learn down the road, we can reflect in different ways. We can reflect both with focused attention, and we can reflect by zooming out. So we have the ability to shift some of the behavior patterns that we want to shift, that we want to change. That's the idea of self-directed neuroplasticity, like procrastination, right? So as I mentioned, ease up on being annoyed with the systems that you don't like, and rather just look at it as something that you're going to be tinkering with. Just getting mad at yourself for having a particular pattern stirs up the red zone, which, as we know, makes it harder to move into neuroplasticity. The red zone shuts down new learning. So when you want to change yourself, there's a direct sabotage to getting mad at yourself for being a certain, I mean, you can try to use getting annoyed with yourself. You didn't make the shot, you get a little bit of annoyance to motivate yourself to want to make the changes. Okay. But eviscerating yourself or self-recrimination or being demeaning to oneself or to others shuts down the new learning pathways, the whole prefrontal lobe. So it won't help. So we want to also begin to transition from what we don't want to do to what we do want to do. And this is a huge point, a really valuable point that I really want to emphasize, because knowing what we don't want is great. That helps. That's step one, but it's just step one because it's a pointer to what we do want. And we don't want to just articulate in terms of what we don't. But when we're aware of what we don't want, I don't want things to be like this anymore. That's the time for us to then say, well, what do I want? How do I want things to be? And the emphasis then becomes on how we do want things to be. All right. So what we don't want is helpful to know. It's helpful to list and pay attention to when your mind tells you something or you tell yourself something that you don't like about the way things are. I don't like it. In fact, it often takes us not liking something to begin to make a change. So it often not liking something, becoming aware that we want is the impetus to wanting things to be different. Otherwise, we just sunbathe all the time on the savannah like lions and tigers. So oftentimes patterns that we wake up and realize we have in young adulthood, they don't really come, they weren't because we decided, oh, I want to be a procrastinator. You just find that you are a procrastinator. So in a sense, you can see how silly and even ridiculous it is to be mad at yourself for being a procrastinator when you didn't design yourself to be that way. But what we do get frustrated because we try to change things and we have a hard time changing them. So let's look at why we have a hard time changing them by understanding willpower. Willpower has been a real focus of study for the last 10, 15 years. And it's not like we thought. It's not what we thought at all. We thought willpower was, put all your energy into it and focus your will, which is a very real thing. You have will, you have volition, you decide you want to get up and go do something. You may have heard people talking lately about how we don't have free will. Has anybody heard that the argument about that we don't really have free will? Well, what they mean by that is they're being literalists, that our will is not completely free. So the part they're disagreeing with on that phrase is not that we don't have will, but that it's not completely free. Okay. And that you can, wrap your head around. So, because no, of course, our will isn't completely free, right? It's limited by all kinds of things. It comes in all kinds of constraints, but we absolutely have will and we absolutely have intention. So it says here that 90% of New Year's resolutions don't pan out. So it's not just you, it's everybody, it's all of us. And change is challenging, and willpower alone isn't strong enough. And the reason why willpower alone isn't strong enough is because, well, it's for several reasons. One of them is that, it's very interesting to realize that the idea of future is not really something that is part of the natural animal kingdom, is not part of the mindset of animals. They don't plan for the future. They have some pre-wired tendencies, like to squirrel away some nuts, but it's not like they're thinking, I am going to plan for the future. It's pre-wired in by nature. So the idea of trying to consider things for the future was a huge evolutionary leap to think, one of the gifts our mind gives us that's also challenging is that we can project out into the future. Our mind is a virtual reality making machine. So it can imagine all kinds of scenarios and possibilities, right? And because of the negativity, survival bias of the brain, oftentimes those lean unless our mind is intentionally focused on things that inspire us. That's why it's really helpful to have a career or areas of interest that fascinate you, because it gives your mind things to reflect on, chew on, and enjoy that are not related to survival-based things like, does this or that person like me, or is there problems at work? We need other things. But anyway, the idea of long-term pleasure, putting things off today, like not eating sweets because we want to have the benefit of say we want to go on a low carb diet and have the health benefits of that, so we're going to cut out sugar. That's not easy to do if it's a long-term benefit thing. We're our biologically, our whole physiology and even early mindset circuitry is designed around short-term goals, right? Meeting immediate needs. And this is from not very long ago. I mean, it wasn't very long ago we were in hunter-gatherer societies, just a few thousand years ago. So about 12,000 years ago, we started farming and agricultural societies, and farming helped us think about future, that if we organize and plan for future. So it's a new thing for us to be thinking about future. And the other thing is that willpower is a muscle. So if we look at the brain, willpower, here's the back of the brain where the brain stem is. And willpower is in the front of the brain and the prefrontal lobes. So when you decide that you want to focus on something, it's prefrontal lobes here, right behind your forehead, prefrontal lobes. This part of the brain is doing sensing and movement, and this part of the brain is doing, of the gray curly matter, is doing vision. The back is in the vision, but the front is where you have that impulse control and delayed gratification and thought, right? Thinking, the virtual reality machine that can project into the future, into the past, is in the front of the brain. So willpower is here, and it's like a muscle. In other words, you have X amount of it right now, just like I have X amount of muscle strength in my arms and in my hands, and we can strengthen it incrementally, but it won't go from 0 to 1,000 immediately. And there's some weaknesses to relying on willpower alone, because willpower wears out, it gets tired after a while. And advertisers bank on that your willpower will get tired. And when your willpower gets tired, you can just think of a million ways that you've done this. That my way used to be that at the end of teaching all day at Butte College, I would love to drive through McDonald's and get a vanilla ice cream. That's that willpower getting tired, and the sort of the more internal pleasure-seeking part of the brain wanting another kind of experience, a more of a pleasure experience, and not pushing, working, focusing, getting things done, exerting willpower. We all exert willpower all day, just behaving well throughout the day. There'll be 100 times when we want to ditch work, or, take a break when we can't, or that we say no to that inner part of ourselves. So we get more vulnerable to desires for short-term pleasure when our willpower wears out. Of course, industries are banking on that. And, cell phones and stuff is a way that we're looking for a dopamine jolt from when we go to our cell phone. That's that uplift, that something good happened. I'm getting something I want, in particular from the social world, obviously. So one of the things we probably find ourselves needing to use willpower with is our phones. So life isn't about finding yourself, it's about creating yourself. And it's a long-term, what do you call it? Sculpture project. So we're going to now look at what's the solution. How do we strengthen willpower? What are some ways that we can sort of work with that system, finesse the system, so that we can get things done? So start by writing down a goal that you have. And you guys already wrote down some goals, like drink more water. One of my goals is to stop drinking so much coffee, right? I want to cut my coffee intake so that it's just a couple cups a day instead of like 4. Now, you heard me mentioned earlier here, and we're already halfway through our slideshow, but we do have a little video to watch. This. So I said to you that I want to stop drinking so much coffee. So, and I mentioned to you my substitution method is a way I found works really well for me. So I found a tea. I'm trying out teas until I find one I like that will help me succeed. So I don't want to drink as much coffee, but I do like warm, soothing drinks. So I want to find good teas and drink those, you see? So this gives me not just, we got the yin yang, right? So this just gives me not just what I'm going to try to get rid of, but what I'm going to move toward. And so this arrow is really important. So what do I want to make a habit? I want to make a habit not drinking tea instead of coffee, basically, and other kind of non-caffeinated drinks. So when we talk about a behavior you want to turn into a habit, I now want to turn a behavior into a habit of drinking non-caffeinated drinks like tea, replacing my coffee with those. So I want to encourage you guys to write into the chat, consider your goal, and now try turning it into a behavior you want to turn it into. Turn it into a habit. Okay, what is the new habit you want to exist, right? Instead of the old behavior. So take a look at your goal that you wrote at the beginning and see how, what kind of habit would support that goal. What habit would support you drinking 8, or what is that habit? You know, I want to drink. Now notice that we're becoming more specific. I want to drink 6 to 8 glasses of water a day. I want to, or whatever it is, you know, I'm going to put, the new habit will be, I'll have a glass of water by the sink, and every time I see it, I'm going to take a glass of water. So, but the habit is really, what do you want to see yourself doing next, right? What's the new habit that you want to establish? Oh, these are great new habits to establish. Drink at least 4 bottles of water a day. Meditate before bed every night. That's a great one, Isabel. At the end of class, I'll show you a link to, I have several guided evening meditation sources that I listen to. One by Michael Seeley. They're excellent. They're wonderful. And you can choose from all kinds of different, and they go on for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and they're beautiful and help you relax. Good. So reduce sugar intake. That's really good. Now that takes us up to here. Remember, when we go to what we don't want is reduce sugar intake. So what is it that you do want? Because what that takes you to do is you go, okay, when I eat sugar, it satisfies a need, right? So how am I going to satisfy that need in another way? What am I going to replace it with? So instead of sugar, I'm going to be doing what? I'm going to be enjoying. So I'm going to shift from sugar to playing an instrument. Really good one, but it probably won't satisfy the same receptors. Your taste buds and things like that are still going to be wanting something that they like, right? But that's good. Replace it with, but how can, like, when you feel like having sugar, you're going to go to, what instrument do you play? You're going to go to like a guitar. Will that do it? Maybe it would do it a lot of the time, but occasionally, what could you eat that would satisfy that feeling of sweetness? Like I use stevia instead of sugar, right? If I didn't have stevia, I'd be in trouble, because I come from a Southern family and we are sugar freaks. Okay, so this is James Clear, and he has lots of really great YouTubes on atomic habits. And atomic habits means starting small, starting whatever change it is that you want to make in micro steps. So this is a short 8-minute video. And while you're watching it, I want to encourage you to be seeing if you can't extract something from it, a way that you can help meet your goal using the tools that you learn about on this video. Okay, or the insights that he's sharing on this video, which are that we want to, I mean, from the bird's eye view, what he's going to be talking about is that what we want to be doing is figuring out how we can make it a natural part of our routine so it becomes automatic. We talked about how the brain likes to put as much as possible on autopilot. And so what we're trying to do here is put things on autopilot. That's a good one, to not pick up extra shifts. I had to tell myself recently, because I was having my mom up for dinner tonight, but I have to prepare a lecture for my class tomorrow, and there is no way. So I had to say to myself, no more social engagements on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday night. So And the only social engagement I have is my 84-year-old mom up. So over for dinner. But I had to say that. So it's really smart to notice something and then say that. Okay, so consider, how can you make this work for you? Here we go.
One way to think about it is just kind of basic math. Like if you just look at the numbers, if you were able to improve by 1% each day for an entire year, and those gains compound, you would end up 37 times better at the end of the year. And if you were to get 1% work,
1% better a day for a year, 37% better. What he's talking about here is the power of compound growth, which is making micro changes. And a really good question to ask ourselves to help ourselves make micro changes toward the goal. And this is great to think about things where you have goal resistance. You know, right now we're doing things that we're applying it to something simple, but you've got many goals in your life, right? And some of them you're resistant to, and you whittle away, you sort of whittle your way at the resistance so that you can move toward that goal closer and closer. A good example of this is quitting smoking. People who quit smoking usually try to quit smoking 5-7 times before they succeed. It's a keeping at it. Each one brings them closer to the one where they will succeed. So already he's saying a really good point. And I want to encourage you guys to notice a point that you find interesting or helpful that your mind can grab onto and maybe even share in the chat at the end of this short 8-minute video. I'll let it go now.
Worse, you would whittle yourself almost all the way down to zero. What's interesting here is that everybody wants a transformation, right? Everybody wants a radical improvement, want rapid success, but we fail to realize that small habits and little choices are transforming us every day already. For the rest of this talk, there are 4 stages of habit formation. I'm going to take you through each of those 4. So the 4 stages are noticing, wanting, doing, and liking. Noticing, wanting, doing, and liking. One of my favorite things about noticing, one of my favorite strategies for discussing it, it's called implementation intentions. Many people think that they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. They think that they need to get more motivated, that they need willpower in order to execute on a habit. If I just felt like writing, if I just felt like meditating, if I felt like working out, then I would do it. But in fact, they don't have a plan for it. And so they wake up each day thinking, I wonder if I'll feel motivated to write today. I wonder if I'll feel motivated to work out today. But instead, you can take the decision-making out of it by explicitly stating when, where, and how.
Okay, so let's look at this one because I just want to punctuate this. And that is that most of the behavior changes we want to make, we're not going to want to feel like them at first. A really good example of this is exercise. Oftentimes, have you guys ever tried something, and you could share in the chat if you have, tried something and noticed that you didn't really want to do that at first? And often starting an exercise routine is one of those, but then it becomes self-reinforcing, right? It starts building on itself because you start liking it after a while. It starts feeling good after a while. But at first, you won't necessarily want to do it. So using the cue of, I'll do it when I feel like it, we throw that one out. We want to get, this is our executive center intention, something that really matters to us. We come up with a plan to do it and to make it part of our lives and make it part of our lives in really small ways, right? The great phrase for this is do the thing relative to your goal that you will do. An example for this for me would be finance. I cannot stand dealing with things that have to do with finance. And I'm hoping that will change, like exercise. But I have a little game that I play with myself where I do 15 minutes of financial stuff a day. Right. And sometimes that leads to more and more and more, but the limited amount of time that I give, and that's an example of a plan, right? I'm not waiting for myself to feel like dealing with my finances. If I do that, I'll never do it. All right. So that's the first thing. And now he's going to outline the stages of a plan.
You want to implement the habit. It sounds easy to say, let's just start a plan. Let's, write down exactly what you should do, and then maybe you'll follow through on it. But of course, we all know that there are challenges that arise. It's not quite that easy. So here's a little strategy that I like to use to make sure you can come up with a better plan of action. And it's called a failure pre-mortem. So the way that it works is you think about the habit, the project, the goal, whatever the most important thing is that you want to work on. And then I want you to imagine, fast forward 6 months from now, and you failed. And then tell the story of why you failed. What happened? What challenges did you encounter? What was it that took you off course? Once you have all that stuff laid out on the table in front of you, you can start to make better choices about how to develop a plan. You can start to have if-then plans. So not only Do I want to exercise for 20 minutes on Monday at 5 p.m.? But also, if I do not exercise because I have to take my kid to practice or whatever, then Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. I will go in, right? You can have ways to adjust for these challenges. Stage 2, wanting.
Okay, so let's apply stage 1 to your goal, okay? And stage 1 is identifying when, where, and how you will implement the new habit. Okay, so go ahead and jot that down on your notepad. When, where, and how will you implement your new habit? How do you want to do it exactly, right? So I mentioned to you that I had said the new thing I wanted to do was cut back on my coffee drinking, right? Now that's going back to what I don't want. And so what we're doing is we're getting rid of something that fulfills a need. So we need to find another way to meet that need, or when the need for that comes up, we will revert back to the old habit. So I want to explore and discover new warm drinks that I like, that I can, probably 2 or 3 choices that I can turn to instead of that. Excuse me. So the when, where, and how for mine would be I'm only going to have 2 cups of coffee a day whenever I choose to have them. And the rest of the time, I am going to drink low caffeine like green tea or caffeine-free alternatives. All right. So that's the when, where, and how. You see how that's really specific. He described it in terms of setting a specific time for exercise, but you can create your own when, where, and how. So there's a specific plan. That's what he means by a specific plan. The if-then scenario is that if you don't do it, then what's the plan? Okay, so I don't have a if-then for the coffee because I don't think you need one for that particular thing. But if you have something that you want to get done every day and you set a time to do it and you don't get it done at that time, then what's the backup? What's the backup plan, right? If I don't get it done, then I will do this. That's the idea of the if then. Okay, and these are ideas to help us create, as he mentioned at the beginning, to put things into a rhythm. And now he's going to go into this point, which is a great point, that one of the most overlooked drivers of your habit is your physical environment. I don't know if you've ever had this experience of opening your refrigerator and we just grab what's in it. And interestingly, if we open our refrigerator, we have a bunch of healthy stuff that is, carrots in a bowl that's easy for us to grab and go with, then we will tend to grab it. And we've seen this proven over and over in research. So using drivers, like putting things in your views so that they inspire you to reach toward them is what he's going to talk about.
One of the most overlooked drivers of habits and human behavior is our physical environment. And this is an interesting insight about our desires. Your environment often influences them. We want things simply because they're an option, right? Simply because they're in front of us at the time. Thankfully, you don't have to be the victim of your environment. You can also be the architect of it. You can decide to design something to make your good behaviors easier and your bad behaviors harder. So when it comes to habits, if you want to practice your guitar more frequently, put it right in the middle of your living room so that you run across it all the time. If you want to read more, when you make your bed in the morning, take the book you want to read, put it on top of the pillow. When you come back that night, pick it up, read a few pages, go to sleep. Many of our desires are simply shaped because we have an environment that shapes us in that way. So the moral of the story is I've never seen someone stick to positive habits in a consistent fashion in a negative environment. Maybe you can overpower it once or twice. Maybe you can have the willpower to do the right thing on one day. But if you're constantly fighting against those forces, it's going to be very hard to follow through. Stage 3.
So an example of that is if you want to not eat sweets and you're in a household where the cupboards are filled with cookies and cakes and things like that. That's what he's talking about. It's extremely difficult. So set up your environment to support your success. An example of this for me would be, for example, and vision really attracts, like seeing something really attracts our attention. So we have a Krug that makes it super easy to make coffee. So making it easy for me to make tea, and the Krug's always out. So keeping my tea out in attractive ways somehow so that I'm using them as a cue. So they're an alternative cue to this quick and easy coffee machine, right? That would be an example. And he mentioned the example, if you want to play more, put it in the middle of your room, right? Make it so you have to stumble over it. So then you at least pick it up, and that begins the first step, right? So this is architecturing our environment, setting up our environment for our success.
The important insight here, especially for habits, is that in the beginning, the most important thing is just to shut up and put your reps in. Just make sure that you hone the skill, right? And you can start to think of it, the way that I like to think of it is that any outcome that you wish to achieve is just a point along the spectrum of repetitions. So if you have few reps to more reps, and you can imagine an easy goal, moderate goal, a hard goal, the more reps that you put in, the more likely you are to achieve that goal. Now, what I like to say is you should optimize for the starting line, not the finish line, right? So often when we think about habits, goals, routines, achievements, it's all about the milestone. We think about how much weight we want to lose, how much money we want to earn, how many subscribers we want to have. It's all fixed on the finish line. But instead, if you can optimize for the starting line, make it as easy as possible to get started and get your reps in, often the outcomes just come as a natural result. Okay, stage 4.
So this is another point that supports setting up your environment so you will get going, right? And also your internal mental environment, telling yourself that all I have to do is this today, right?
The only reason that we repeat behaviors is because we enjoy them, because we like the reward. If we don't enjoy the experience along the way, we're unlikely to stick with it. And that means that you need to figure out ways to bring a reward into the present moment, because good habits have a problem. And that problem is that for good habits, the immediate consequence is there. There's a cost that happens in the moment, but the reward is often delayed. So you need to figure out how to bring the reward into the present moment to stick to a good habit. And someone else who's going to be speaking here, Seth Godin, had a very nice little quote about this, where the best way to change long-term behavior is with short-term feedback. And one way to think about that is that long-term behaviors, sticking with writing for years on end or going to the gym and so on, they have those delayed consequences. So you need a way to enjoy it in the moment. So here's what I think you should do. Get a wall calendar where you can see every day of the year mapped out on it. And then any day that you do your task of writing jokes for 15 minutes, I want you to just put an X on that day. And you'll have a couple false starts here and there, but at some point you're going to get a little bit of a chain going, right? You get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days in a row. And at that point, your only goal becomes to don't break the chain. Doesn't matter how good or how bad the jokes are. Doesn't matter if it makes it into your material. Just don't break the chain. What's interesting about this is that by measuring your progress, you get an immediate reward in the moment, right? The reward of like having a great stand-up routine 40 days from now or 40 weeks from now or whatever, is not, it's so delayed that you need something in the moment that makes you feel good. So if you do those 15 minutes, you can cross that off. That's a way to get an immediate hit, a little bit of a reward by tracking it. We often fear that in order to achieve something new, to become someone new, we have to abandon everything that we are. But in fact, that's not how it works. Change can happen plank by plank, board by board, habit by habit. And gradually, you can become someone new. With consistency and repetition, you can actually change not only your results, but actually your identity. Is because the more evidence that we have for a belief, the more likely we are to believe it. So if you go to church every Sunday for 20 years, you believe that you are religious. If you study Spanish every Thursday night for 20 minutes, you believe that you are studious. The actions that you take provide evidence for who you are. And it's not that habits matter more necessarily on an individual basis. Each moment in life matters. But what ends up happening is that over the broad span of time, things that you do once or twice fade away. And things that you do time after time, day after day, week after week, accumulate the bulk of the evidence for what you believe about yourself. And so every action that you take is actually a vote for the type of person that you want to become. If you want to become someone new, then you can take a new action and begin to accumulate evidence for that identity, for that belief about yourself. And that the more votes that you cast, the more likely you are to win the election. You don't need to be unanimous. You don't have to be perfect all the time. You just need to have the body of work. So true change is actually not behavior change. It's not results change. It's not process change. It's identity change. The goal is not to read a book. It's to become a reader. The goal is not to write a book or write an article. It's to become a writer. The goal is not to run a marathon. It's to become a runner, to become a type of person, to develop an identity. And the way to being something or becoming someone is through doing something.
So let's apply this to our goal. How this relates to our identity, what we want to become. So if I say that I want to drink less coffee, what is it that I'm trying to become by doing that? and I want to become healthier. I want to become calmer. So being clear on how this supports our identity development. And he raises a beautiful point here about how doing these things helps to further our, our creating ourself. So jot down for your goal what it is that you are becoming by doing that goal. If it's relating to eating healthier, then it's because your goal is to become a healthy person. If it's related to exercise, your goal is to become strong, physically strong and fit, right? So this is the higher goal behind our goal, which is basically relates to how we want our identity influenced by this goal, who we want to be influenced by this goal.
Marathons to become a runner, to become a type of person, to develop an identity. And the way to being something or becoming someone is through doing something. So every time you sit down to write, every time you practice that habit, you are being a writer. Every time you play a sport, you're being an athlete. Every time you practice painting or music or whatever, you're being an artist. And habits are not only the method through which we achieve external measures of success.
So we can say to ourselves, for example, and he mentioned that we have to experience pleasure in the process of our habits or we'll give up on them. And one way to experience pleasure, to bring pleasure into the present, is by reinforcing positive things, like by feeling good about what we're doing. So when I drink my tea, I can say I am becoming a healthy person and a calm person, which reinforces both the experience of doing it and the act of regularly drinking tea instead of coffee.
Success, like losing weight or gaining more, earning more money, or meditating and reducing stress. They are also the path through which we achieve internal change and actually become someone new. They're the path through which we forge the identity that we have, the deepest beliefs we have about ourselves, our sense of self. And so if you can change your habits, you can change your life. Thank you.
Okay, James Clear, if you find that inspiring, he has lots of videos out there that you can watch relative to atomic habits. I think what we do here for the rest of our slideshow is review some of these steps that he mentioned. Sorry. Okay. So this is the power of incremental change, of doing the small thing, even beginning. I've got a push-up challenge going with my son, for example, right now, and I started with 10, and now I'm at 25, and I do modified push-ups, but he does the regular ones. So incremental change, it's amazing how much we can grow. And I know you have all had experiences of growing really well through incremental change. This is 1% better every day, another short talk by James Clear. So he talked about giving goals a time and place to live in the world. Well, he talks on this video, 1% change, about noticing what you want to change and making it manifest, right? So having tea out in a teacup and making it in front of you lets you know. And then specifically stating when, where, and how you will implement the habit, right? How you want to do it. You can do this to yourself, right? You don't have to make a big deal. You can write it down if it helps to write things down and reinforce. I really like writing things down. But what you want is some clarity, right, of what you really want. And you may have to tweak this because you may find that it doesn't work from 7 to 9. It's going to work better from 4 to 6 or whatever it is, right? You will learn things and tweak your goal, adapt it, but you are starting to really get clear on when, where, and how. And then one of the things that we definitely want to do is plan for obstacles. What could get us off track, right? So this is why having ideas about what you're going to do when you feel like having a cup of coffee, what's the plan, right? So my plan is to find 2 or 3 substitutes that I really like, so I have some choices of where to go. And it's amazing once you commit to something. My son sent me a picture of a tea that a dear friend of his drinks, and that's what I'm trying here. And it's really good. It's surprisingly good. So the universe will step forward and give you some support usually through surprise synchronicities. We'll talk sometime about that. Carl Jung's ideas about synchronicities. And there's the idea of the if then. So if I can't exercise Tuesday, then I will do it before TV. And one of my favorite things to do is to, it's a game I play or a hack that you can do, is to get yourself to do the things you don't want to do before the rewards of the things you do want to do. Like, I'm going to study for a half hour before I watch my favorite Netflix show, right? Or I'm going to eat. When I started trying to eat healthy, I told myself that I'm going to eat I'm not going to have anything sweet until I've eaten all the basic requirements of what you've got to eat in a day, right? 4 servings, 5 servings of vegetables, a couple servings of protein. Okay, and this is about creating wanting in yourself, making that part easy, creating the I want to actually do this in this moment, because we may not actually want to do it in this moment, making that easier for ourselves by designing our environment to support the new habit, right? So this is an example of laying your exercise clothes out. And notice how, the cell phones are totally geared that way, right? Our cell phones with us all the time, so it makes it easy for that to become a habit. So to architect, one of the ways that one student last semester, they wanted to spend less time on social media. So they got rid of the Facebook app on their phone. They kept it on their computer, but it made it harder for them to get to. And then they knew they wanted to increase social support. So that's taking away something, not doing Facebook as much. What they wanted to add was writing creative stories, but also they wanted to, they decided to call a couple of their friends a day and say supportive things in order to offset the shift in social engagement that would entail. And he mentioned shut up and put your reps in. The idea of quantity, of actually doing it, sitting down and doing it, right? Everyone may not be great, but sitting down for the 15 minutes a day of finance, 5 days a week, is really helpful. And there's the 2-minute rule to get you going, which means I'm going to do it for 2 minutes, right? So I started doing the push-ups that way. Actually, I started exercise that way, and now I'm really doing a lot more exercise than I thought I would be doing by now, by applying the 2-minute rule. So the 2-minute rule, I'll just do it for 2 minutes, is a really helpful tool to get us going. And then not breaking the chain. Once you get a chain going, that's a fun way to think about it. He talked about putting up the calendar. I know students who have created actual chains with paper and just kept building them. But finding a way to acknowledge, I put a star on the calendar on my fridge, and watching them grow gives you a positive feedback bump, right? Having these kinds of self-reinforcement tools, making it visible. Seinfeld is the one who has the don't break the chain, because he has the thing about, if you want to become a comedian, you got to write jokes every day. And you start writing them for 15 minutes a day. And the idea is that you don't stop, you don't break that chain. So that's a neat concept that can help us with our goal. And then the idea that change happens plank by plank, board by board, and being willing to incrementally. It takes a while to build a ship in your garage, but it does become this, and focusing on how this is shaping our identity, right? Who we are becoming. Like the identity of being healthy and calm. And there's an inner motivator to that. You might feel it within yourself when you say the identity you're evolving toward by moving toward that goal. Let's say you're going to study 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day on your schoolwork, and you've been only putting in, say, 45 minutes a day. You can, and by the way, it really helps us to work in 1.5 hour increments and then take some kind of break, because after 1.5 hours, cognitive load sort of hits. So taking a break and doing 15 minutes of something playful and fun, totally different from intense focus, and then going back to it is really a wise way to do it. So breaking our focused intention work up into 1.5 hour increments. 1.5 hours is about the longest, but reflecting on what we're becoming. How is this shaping our identity? I'm going to become a calmer and healthier person, stronger feeling person. And speaking of strengths, by shifting from coffee to tea helps reinforce doing that. Speaking of strengths, this is part of your assignment in this week, is what's called the strengths test. And in the strengths test, what you do, this is the last slide actually, what you do is you identify your top 5 strengths. So if you click on this, and it's not working, that's weird. Okay, so I will have to fix the hyperlink on that slideshow.
I think if you hold down control and click it, it should work for you.
Oh, really? Oh, thank you.
Maybe. Fingers crossed.
It's a Mac, so.
Oh, I don't know.
I did do it as a hyperlink. I'm not sure why it's working, but I'll just go high 5 test. So basically, this is the strengths finder is what you're going to be doing. And they do, you do sign in, but it doesn't take the free high 5 test. And this is the official one, and you can do the free one. So you do have to sign in with email, but that's all you would have to do, and then start the test. And what it's going to do is identify what are called 5 signature strengths that you have. So it's really fun. And you can see down here on the slide, which won't go all the way down. Hold on. You can see here on this slide what some of these strengths are. I can actually show you. And we talk about this next week. These are what's called signature strengths. And one of the things that they discovered is that, and there's 34 of them, and one of the things that they discovered is that when we focus on our strengths, we do a lot better than when we focus on our weaknesses. And we can use our strengths to help transform our weaknesses. So woo is, having that excitement energy, bringing excitement energy into a room. So these are the strengths, and they may use slightly different words, but these are basically them of Strengths Quest. Okay. And this is the test that you're taking, is the Strengths Quest. And so it's going to come up with 5 with a little descriptor, and you read the little descriptor. This is part of your assignment. It looks like this one's a little better. So you're going to read the little descriptor. You might be surprised by some of what your strengths include. And these are really things that you want to have on your resume. These are things that you're gifted at. So when you come in, when you enter a room, when you become part of a team, when you become part of a group, you bring these strengths. And obviously, these are all things that have helped human beings survive and thrive and flourish. And we'll talk more about the Strengths Quest and how you can use it next week to create a sense of, to help you achieve your goals, but also to really be aware of some of the gifts that you bring and that you can use to help transform things where you're not so strong. That's one of the things that's cool about Strengths Quest. For example, one of my strengths is it on here? Well, one is harmony. Where is it? Achiever, activator. This is an energizer. Adaptability, the ability to change, the ability to analyze, the ability to organize and arrange. Belief is believing in others, being encouraging and being a believer in others. And this is actually one of mine. And an example of using a signature strength like believing in would be to apply that to myself. For example, I can believe that I can do finance. I can shift out of the fixed mindset about finance and apply that believer encouragement to myself about approaching finance. So we'll be looking more. So that's why the Strengths Finder is, the Strengths Finder is really a highly legitimate test that is used by corporations all over the place for people to become aware of the different kinds of strengths they bring. And again, feature in your resume. These are 5. And of course, you're going to have more strengths. And you may notice on the list, when you look at the list, that there are strengths that you have that didn't come up in the top 5 because tests are imperfect, especially short forms of them. So add that in, right? But it's very important to be aware, because once again, this puts us into the green zone of the brain and gives us tools for working with areas where we aren't so strong. So very helpful is to use the Strengths Quest. And that's one of the assignments this week, is to take that test. You do not have to pay for anything. So if there's anything that says pay for anything, you don't have to do that. Thanks for that tip. I really appreciate that tip on how to try to make the link work. And I'm glad I found out that it doesn't, because students would be frustrated. So that's our lecture for this week, everybody. I'm going to close with a short meditation. So if anybody wants to stay for the meditation, you're welcome to. You don't, not required to stay for the meditation, but I would like to ask you to write something in the chat by way of closing the exercise today. I'm going to ask you to write 2 things in the chat for your closing quiz questions. The first one is your favorite thing that you learned in the lecture today. What is one idea that really stuck with you, that you found interesting? And I'll buzz through the ideas so that you can review them. We talked about how we sort of wake up and we inherited the characteristics that we have from our past and our wiring, and we don't have to kick ourselves for it, right? But once we become aware of it, then it becomes our responsibility to finesse the system. So that was big idea number 1. And that we're a collection of systems, and that these systems are habits, right? And some of the habits we may want to change. This is a key point, that once you notice something that you don't like, the thing is to go, okay, I don't like feeling so pressured. Well, what do you want to feel? That's what you do next. Where do you want to be? I want to feel more relaxed. What's it going to take to get more relaxed? And that's where the planning part comes in, right? But you want to shift what you don't want to what you do want, so that you know that what you do want, that's what you're moving towards. Creates a clear pointer. All right, this is about the heroic journey of transformation, call to adventure, to change a pattern or habit, which is a neural pathway, right? So it's going to take a little bit of effort. And that willpower, if we expend willpower all day long, we wear out, and so we'll become vulnerable to temptation. One of the reasons is because the concept of future was an evolutionary leap for humans, and because willpower acts like a muscle and actually wears out. Then we talked about how industries use billions of dollars to, basically, they want to get your attention when your willpower is tired, because that's when you make a quicker and more impulsive decision about pleasure, about something that will bring immediate pleasure. And then we were introduced to James Clear's ideas about hacking goals with atomic habits. These aren't just his ideas. These are a compilation of information from research that he wrote about really well in his book, Atomic Habits. And we all wrote down goals so that we could practice applying these key ideas to our goals. We talked about the power of compound growth, that doing a little bit each day or a little bit most days will create radical change over the course of time. We talked about implementation intentions. In other words, knowing when, where, and how you will introduce. This is where you start to get where the rubber meets the road. How am I going to do this? When I want to drink coffee, I am going to go to one of the options of tea that I found instead, right? Mm-hmm. We talked about planning for obstacles and setting yourself up for success. It's helpful to think about things that will be challenges or obstacles, and brainstorm what could be a potential solution to those challenges or obstacles relative to your goal. We talked about cultivating your environment, being the architect of your environment to support it, so it helps support the new habit you want to develop. And we talked about getting started with the 2-minute rule. He mentioned that a lot of times we think about the end rather than beginning. And that is a real helpful thing to think about, that what'll get us started, And one of the things that helps me get started is realizing that I use several things. One is knowing that I'm not going to necessarily want to. And I also try, when I have things I really don't want to do, I try to pair something pleasurable with it, like a cup of tea that you really like. And you guys do this yourselves, but it's really handy. Or give yourself a reward, like you get to watch your favorite TV show when it's on. And we talked about not breaking the chain. Once you get a rhythm going, seeing if you can't make it visible, because that's reinforcing for us that this is the power of incremental change. It happens bit by bit. So acknowledging when you do those little things, and then the idea about how this relates to how we're transforming our own identity, right? Me to feeling calmer physically inside. And then last was the strengths. So the last question for the quiz question for today is, what is the action step that you're going to take and report in this week about how you did last week relative to your new habit? And I'll give you an example of myself. My goal is to drink only 2 cups of coffee all week, and drink tea instead, whatever forms of non-caffeinated beverages. And I'll give myself one day if I want to have 3 cups, because it's nice to have a little bit of wiggle room in your, that way it's not just really too constricted or controlled. And that's what I'm going to be reporting in on next week. And I'll let you know, guys, know how I do. So share what you want to get done over the course of this week. And that will close our class for today. I am going to, if you need to go or have other things to do, you are welcome to bid your colleagues a warm farewell. Oh, I love the be the architect mantra. I really like that idea too, of creating the environment that leads to our own success as well. Oh, nice. I like the idea of taking out your instruments. Oh, I'm glad you like that part that we inherit. Yeah, we got them from being, we wake up as an adult wired up, pre-wired, and now you have to deal with the wiring. The good news is that we have some hack tools for wiring ourselves, but cut yourselves some slack, because you got the deck of cards you got, and you didn't decide on what you got, right? So you can't really take total responsibility for that. What you can take responsibility for is the effort to transform. Understanding willpower, right on. And I just love, it's so interesting to me how people pick different things, and I find that so